Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how could Robb Stark have won the War of the Five Kings and what he could have done differently. So, the real question is though, could he have actually won in general? And the answer is no. So thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right. We'll talk about how he possibly could have won the War of the Five Kings, or at least came out on top. I will say it is very difficult. There's a certain point that we're going to talk about in this video that I'll talk about, in the video. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do it up. Channel grow, reach, appeal at my likes content as well. And let's get into it. So what I'm referencing is the big mistake Robb makes, and it's really not anything that Robb actually does himself, is that Robb is crowned King of the North. This isolates him. He's going to have almost no allies from either Stannis or Renly because he's a king. And Robb is looked at as taking part of their kingdoms. So again, this is a terrible mistake. I've talked about this in the past, but let's go past that because, in my opinion, nothing Robb can control there, right? So let's go to when I really believe Robb lost the war. And Robb loses the war the day Stannis Baratheon loses in the Blackwater. That is the day he loses the war, because with nobody else really fighting the Lannisters and it's just Robb, he has no hope. The Tyrells and the Lannisters are going to destroy him one way or another. The North has been taken. So let's look at the factors Robb could control, because there are a lot of things in this scenario that he just couldn't control. So the best thing Robb could have done to win the War of the Five Kingdoms is to ally with Stannis. If he allies with Stannis, I think it's a lot more difficult for the Tyrells to A, believe that they're going to be on a winning side with the Lannisters, and 2, with the Stark forces, they could have made sure that there was no other force that came in while Stannis' forces took the city. So with all that being said, the quick answer is, as long as he allies with Stannis, he would have won. But we're not going to look at that because I think that's too easy of an answer. And let's explore, could Robb have at least survived the war if he had done a couple things right? So let's first talk about Theon. Sending Theon to the Iron Islands was a terrible decision. Catelyn, in my opinion, should have pushed back on it harder, bringing up that Ned, specifically said to keep Theon close. And she never brings that up, but Robb, it is his decision ultimately, and he sends Theon away, and we know how that goes. So let's say that Theon stays with Robb, right? So Winterfell would never have been taken, and it would have been plausible that the Stark forces in the North already would have been able to reclaim the North, in my opinion. I don't think Robb would have actually had to go back. I think losing Winterfell and the forces that end up dying outside of Winterfell because of Ramsay really hurt the chances of them taking out the rest of the Ironborn at that point of the war. Also, it really gets helped because Victarion and a lot of the Greyjoys end up leaving for the Kingsmoot, which makes it much easier for, Ramsay and Roose to retake the North as a whole. So, in this scenario, the Greyjoys, or Theon specifically, is still with Robb. That does not happen. Now, the next part is going to be Jaime Lannister is not released. So, that is another thing Robb, I guess, could have controlled. And we're just going to say that maybe Robb kept Catelyn more under surveillance and that Jaime was never allowed to go. So, Jaime, to me, is the big one, because Jaime just, it makes it to where Tywin cannot really make a move against Robb in that regard, because if anything happens, say at a red wedding type scenario, Jaime will die, and that is Tywin's biggest fear. Jaime being freed allows Tywin to do all of this type of planning and allows for this idea of the red wedding. So again, I am trying to look at this as the best case scenario for how Robb could have won the War of the Five Kings. And the best case scenario is things that Catelyn does not actually happening. So with this, I don't believe the Karstarks would have kind of turned if Jaime is still a prisoner. So I think that eliminates that part. And then the other big one is Robb not marrying Jane. So let's say some other person had been nursing Robb's wounds. I've made a video last week talking about how I think Jane's mother had actually put Jane in the situation to be the one looking over Robb, to maybe have that happen. I think that was something that Jane's mother decided was a good risk, because she could get her daughter to become Queen of the North if that was to happen, or even look to get favor from Tywin in that regard as well. So I think for me, let's say Robb stays true and he does continue to marry a Frey. It eliminates a lot of the possible problems going on in the Robb camp. Now, I do think Roose would still be plotting against Robb, because really we see the thing that inevitably starts to turn things against Robb is when Stannis loses the Blackwater, because it really does look hopeless. Robb's would be outnumbered probably 1 to 3 or 4 in the war. Now, Robb again has been doing really well in the war. He never lost a battle. But I think the overwhelming forces of the Tyrells and Lannisters would eventually be able to beat Robb if he stayed in the southern parts of Westeros, or I guess past, or in the Riverlands or the Westerlands. I think eventually Robb would have been captured and killed. So I think what would have ended up happening in best case scenario for Robb is that Robb makes a peace with the Lannisters and gives up his crown King of the North. The problem with being King of the North is that Tywin is not going to let you be King of the North and just retreat up north. Now, he could do that. Robb could do that. He could say he's still King of the North, retreat north, and just guard Moat Cailin. But the problem is he's going to lose all of the Riverlands. They're all going to have to bend the knee to the Lannisters, and Robb really can't oppose them. So like I said, I think the best case scenario for Robb coming out at least somewhat on top of the War of the Five Kings, outside of just allying with Stannis or Renly, would have been to just basically go up north and have a peace with the Lannisters, right? I think trade Jaime for Sansa and just be done with it, right? Because in reality, the Starks were never going to be able to win by themselves, and as soon as Robb is crowned King of the North, they basically isolate themselves. The only other, I think, possibility that could have eventually propped itself up would have been if the Ironborn had actually supported Robb. Then you would have had a legitimate chance, but that's never going to happen because Balon Greyjoy is an idiot. Maybe after Balon dies, when Euron ended up coming back over, that is a possibility. But again, I don't think it's possible. I just think Robb had no shot after really the ending of Book 2. I think Book 2 is really the ending of Robb. And it's something that we really, as an audience, just are hoping somehow that Robb's going to win. But there really is not a way, realistically, for Robb to win the war after Stannis' defeat. And that's kind of how I think Robb would have been able to do. I think Robb would have had to give up his crown. I think he would have had to bend the knee. And that's the best case scenario for the Starks, that maybe they get Sansa back in response for Jaime. That's the best I can really see for the Starks. But let me know if you guys think there is a way Robb could have won the war without there being some alliance to Renly or Stannis. Let me know. Do you guys think there is something Robb could have done differently outside of the kind of the major things I just talked about, or do you think those could have led to something differently in the story and how that could have worked out? Also, something I do want to point out in this video is that if Robb and Catelyn had not died at the Red Wedding, we have to remember that Arya actually would have met up with them. So that is something that is interesting to think about, is that Arya actually would have been with her family back there again. So it is really interesting that you really would never have seen Bran or Rickon leave, none of that. The Stark family, for the most part, would have been whole outside of Ned. So I really think that is the best outcome for Robb's campaign and all of that. So thank you guys all for watching this video. Thank you guys for 1,000 subscribers if we've gotten there at this point. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you guys have been enjoying the content as always. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.